The sea has always carried secrets. Some lie buried beneath the waves, while others, washed ashore, wait for someone to discover them. But there are some things that should never be found. In the small coastal town of Bar Harbor, Maine, there stands a lighthouse at the edge of the cliffs. Salt and wind have chewed its walls for more than a century. The people of the town avoid talking about it except in hushed tones when the fog rolls in too thick. They say it is cursed. They say no keeper has ever stayed longer than a year. And it all began with a stone. Daniel Crow had never been a man of the sea. He was a quiet soul, a man who preferred books over company, silence over conversation. When he accepted the job of lighthouse keeper in 1979, most of the locals thought he was either brave or foolish. On his first day, he walked the narrow cliffside path leading to the tower. The sea stretched endlessly before him, gray and restless under the storm-heavy sky. Waves smashed against the black rocks below, sending up sprays of white foam. The lighthouse itself loomed tall and weathered, its glass eye staring blankly out into the horizon. The iron door creaked when he pushed it open. Inside, the air smelled of rust, seawater, and old oil. On the desk, in the keeper's quarters, he found a battered leather journal. Its pages were warped with salt. The handwriting inside was uneven, almost frantic. At the bottom of the last entry, Daniel read, "The stone watches the sea. Don't let it watch you." The rest of the page was torn. That first night, as the storm winds howled outside, Daniel sat by the desk, turning the journal over in his hands. Something rattled inside it. Tucked within the back cover, he discovered a small stone, smooth, white, and cold to the touch. It gleamed faintly, even though there was no light in the room. He set it on the desk, and for a moment he swore it pulsed, like a heartbeat. When Daniel awoke the next morning, the storm had passed. The stone still sat on the desk, pale as bone, harmless in the daylight. He shook his head at himself, convinced it was just fatigue, just the creaks of an old building playing tricks on him. But as the days went on, the strange things began. That night, he heard something. Not the waves. Not the wind. A whisper. At first, it was faint, like the echo of a voice trapped deep within the walls. Then clearer. It spoke his name. Daniel. He froze in his bed, his skin prickling. The voice seemed to come from the desk, where the stone still Saturday that night. Daniel could not sleep. The whispering clung to the corners of the room like fog. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought he heard it again, faint, but insistent. Daniel. The voice was not angry. Not threatening. It was soft, almost pleading. And that made it far more terrifying. He forced himself out of bed, grabbed the oil lamp, and set it down on the desk. The flame flickered, casting long shadows across the stone walls. There it was. The small white stone, sitting where he had left it. Still. Silent. Innocent. But Daniel knew what he had heard. He picked it up. It was colder than before, like ice held too long in his palm. For an instant, he thought he felt a vibration, a tremor running through it, like the faint hum of a living thing. He dropped it back on the desk. The whisper stopped. The next morning, Daniel left the lighthouse to fetch supplies from town. The fog had rolled in thick, swallowing the cliffs. The path was slick with dew. Every step down toward the harbor felt heavier than the last. When he reached the general store, the locals stared at him. Their eyes were sharp, suspicious. The store owner, an older man with a weathered face, finally spoke. "You've been up there 3 nights now." Daniel nodded. "Yes. It's quiet, except the storms." The man's expression tightened. He leaned in, lowering his voice. "You didn't find it, did you?" Daniel frowned. "Find what?" But the man didn't answer. He only muttered something under his breath, handed Daniel his supplies, and turned away. That evening, Daniel returned to the lighthouse unsettled. The town felt hostile, secretive, as if everyone knew something he did not. Inside his quarters, the stone still waited on the desk. For hours he avoided looking at it, trying to busy himself with chores, logs, and maintenance. But every time he passed the desk, he felt it, like eyes pressing against his back. Finally, as night fell and the waves battered the cliffs below, he gave in. He sat down in front of it. The stone gleamed faintly in the lamplight. And then, it whispered again. Not just his name this time, but something else. Come closer. Daniel's breath caught. His pulse hammered in his ears. He leaned closer despite himself, his face inches from the stone. And in that instant, he saw it. Not just a reflection. Not just the glow. But shapes. Figures moving inside the smooth white surface. Men thrashing in black water. Faces twisted in panic. Arms reaching out, screaming silently. And among them, one face stood out. His own. Daniel staggered back, nearly tipping over the chair. The stone sat silently once more, as though nothing had happened. He turned away, clutching his head, trying to convince himself it was a trick of the light, a trick of his imagination. But the whispers did not stop. And now, they grew louder. The sea. The following days blurred together. Daniel tried to focus on his duties, cleaning the lantern glass, logging the tides, trimming the wicks. But no matter what he did, his mind kept drifting back to the stone. It waited for him. Always on the desk. Always watching. And every night, the whispers grew louder. Sometimes they came like the rush of the tide, filling the whole room. Other times, they were so close it was as if someone were standing right behind him, breathing into his ear. Daniel, the sea calls you. He began to dream of drowning. Cold water filling his lungs. The taste of salt burning his throat. And in the darkness beneath the waves, glowing eyes, staring at him from the deep. On the fourth night, Daniel lit the oil lamp and opened the old journal again, the one left behind by the previous keeper. He turned to the last intact entry. The writing was jagged, words etched deep into the page as if carved in desperation. It is not a stone. It is a window. And once you look through, the sea will never let you go. Daniel's hand trembled. He closed the book, staring at the smooth white stone glowing faintly before him. A window. He reached for it again. The cold stabbed into his palm. He brought it closer to the lamp's light, and again, the surface shifted. This time, he saw not just drowning sailors, but something deeper. A woman's face. Pale. Hair drifting like seaweed. Eyes wide, lips moving silently beneath the water. Her hand pressed against the inside of the stone, as if begging to be freed. Daniel gasped and dropped it. The stone rolled across the desk and stopped, pulsing once, like the beat of a heart. The whispers surged. Help us, help us. From that night on, Daniel stopped leaving the lighthouse. The townsfolk noticed. Supplies left at the path remained uncollected. No lantern light shone from the tower some nights, even as storms raged. Inside, Daniel scribbled frantically in his own journal. Maps of the coastline, shapes of ships wrecked in the past century, fragments of words he did not understand. Symbols that seemed to pour into his head uninvited. He barely ate, barely slept. Only watched the stone. Listened to it. He began to hear the woman's voice more clearly now, rising above the chorus of whispers. Daniel, I am waiting. The sea is waiting, sometimes, in the howling of the wind outside. He swore he could hear her crying. And worst of all, he had begun to answer back. One stormy night, he climbed the spiral staircase to the lantern room. Waves hammered the cliffs, spray crashing against the windows. The whole tower shuddered under the force of the sea. Daniel held the stone tightly in his hand. It glowed brighter than ever, a cold white flame against the storm. He raised it to the glass, and for a brief instant, the sea went silent. And in the reflection, in the dark pane of the lantern glass, he did not see himself. He saw the woman. Smiling, the storm did not end. Hour after hour, the sea raged as though it wanted to tear the lighthouse from its cliff. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder rolled endlessly across the horizon. And through it all, the stone pulsed in Daniel's hand, glowing brighter, beating harder, like a second heart. He stumbled down the spiral staircase, clutching it to his chest. The whispers had grown deafening now, voices overlapping like 100 drowning throats gasping for air. But one voice cut through them all. Clear. Sweet. Seductive. Daniel, you can free me. But the sea demands its price. He collapsed at the desk, slamming the stone down on the wood. The glow spread outward like veins of light, crawling across the surface. Daniel stared, wide-eyed, as the light formed shapes, scenes of the past, etched into the wood. He saw ships breaking apart on the rocks below, sailors screaming as they vanished beneath the waves. He saw the woman, her pale arms reaching out, dragged down into the abyss. And then he saw something else. The lighthouse keepers before him. One by one, they appeared, men seated at the same desk, stone glowing before them, their eyes hollow, their faces twisted in madness. Daniel's breath hitched. The stone wasn't just a window. It was a chain. Each keeper had inherited it. Each had been consumed. The whispers swelled. The sea demands a soul. Bring it to us. Daniel stumbled back, shaking his head violently. No, I won't. But the stone throbbed, furious now, the light so bright it burned his eyes. His mind filled with a crashing wave, endless and violent, until he thought he would drown where he stood. And then a knock. The sound echoed through the tower. 3 slow, deliberate knocks at the iron door below. Daniel froze. No one came to the lighthouse in weather like this. No one should even be able to reach the cliff path in such a storm. The knocks came again. Louder this time. Bang, bang, bang. His hands trembled as he picked up the lantern and descended the stairs. At the door, the wind howled through the cracks, rattling the frame. Slowly, with shaking fingers, he unlatched the lock and pulled it open. A man stood there, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to his face, eyes wide with desperation. He looked like a fisherman, his clothes torn, his skin pale as death. Please, the man gasped, nearly collapsing. The storm, my boat, please, you have to help me. Daniel's chest tightened. He should have reached out, should have pulled the man inside. But behind him, the whispers surged louder than ever. A soul. The sea must have a soul. Daniel's lantern flickered. His vision swam. And in the trembling light, the fisherman's reflection on the wet floor didn't match his body. In the reflection, his face was drowned. Bloated. Dead. The man staggered forward, clutching Daniel's arm. His skin was ice cold. His eyes desperate. Please help me, the stone flared in Daniel's pocket, burning against his leg. His mind filled with the woman's voice again. One life for another. Daniel. One soul for freedom. He stared into the fisherman's eyes, and for a moment, just a moment, he wanted to let go. He wanted to give the man over, to surrender him to the sea. The whispers roared, the tower shaking around him. The storm screamed through the open doorway. And Daniel realized the stone wasn't asking. It was choosing. The fisherman's grip on Daniel's arm tightened, his fingernails digging into the skin. His eyes were wild with fear, but his reflection was already dead. The stone burned like fire in Daniel's pocket. The voices inside his skull were deafening now, a crashing chorus of the drowned. Give him to us, Daniel. Give the sea what it demands. The storm roared through the doorway, tearing at the man's coat, flinging salt and rain into the tower. Daniel's breath came in ragged gasps. His heart thundered, torn between mercy and the weight of the stone's demand. He whispered, brokenly, I don't want this. I never wanted this. But the woman's voice cut through the storm, soft, sweet, undeniable. Then let me free. Just one life, Daniel, and I will be yours. Forever. The fisherman clutched at him harder. Please. I'm begging you. For a long moment, time seemed to stop. Daniel could feel both fates pressing down on him, the man's desperate, trembling body before him, and the stone's cold, glowing promise in his pocket. The lighthouse groaned. The sea howled. And Daniel made his choice. He pushed the man inside, slammed the iron door shut. The fisherman collapsed on the floor, coughing, water pooling around him. Thank you, oh God, thank you. Daniel's hands shook as he pulled the stone free. It blazed white-hot in his palm, humming like the heart of a storm. The whispers screamed in fury. No, no, the sea must be fed. Daniel raised the stone high, his eyes wild. Not him, he shouted into the empty tower. His voice cracked, echoing against the walls. If a soul is what you want, then take mine. The stone pulsed violently. The glow spread across his arm, up his chest, wrapping him in a cold, merciless light. The voices rose to a deafening crescendo. And then silence. The fisherman looked up, wide-eyed. Daniel stood frozen, the stone embedded in his chest, glowing faintly like a second heart. His face was pale, his eyes glassy, his lips trembling with words he could no longer speak. The last thing he whispered was the woman's voice, flowing from his mouth, though it was not his own. "The sea is mine." And then, like a candle snuffed out, Daniel crumpled to the floor. The stone rolled free from his body, faintly glowing, before dimming once more. The fisherman scrambled back, horrified, before fleeing into the storm, never to return. Days later, when the townsfolk finally braved the path to the lighthouse, they found it empty. No sign of the fisherman. No sign of Daniel. Only a journal left open on the desk, words scrawled across the final page. "The stone does not belong to me. It does not belong to any of us. It belongs to the sea. And the sea will always come to collect." And there it was. The stone. Small. White. Harmless. Waiting for the next keeper. To this day, sailors say the lighthouse still shines on stormy nights, though it has long been abandoned. And if you walk the cliffs when the fog is heavy, some swear you can hear it, a whisper calling your name. Soft, sweet, impossible to resist. Because the stone is still there. Waiting. Always waiting.